This animation highlights just one amongst a countless number of scenarios that can take place at an intersection whereby a vehicle poses a danger to the pedestrians on the corner of such an intersection. We'll have a look at the animation to start off with, and then we'll discuss a few points. Just reset that. So notice the red vehicle crossing into the path of the green vehicle at the intersection, the driver of the green vehicle trying to avoid him and shoots over the corner of the intersection and almost strikes a cyclist. So the first point here is that one needs to be on the lookout if you are a pedestrian, even though you may be a distance from the corner, and as we'll see in a few of the videos to follow, that one could still be in danger. So not even necessarily right on the corner, obviously that's more of a threat, but even a distance from the corner, one still has to be aware of what's happening around you. So that's a one point. Second point, which we'll also see a couple of videos, is never to enter an intersection at speed. And so the driver of the green vehicle was traveling too fast in going through the intersection, couldn't stop or slow down in time to avoid having to cross right over the corner of the intersection. So two very important points: speed, and for the pedestrians to be aware of what's taking place around them. All right, so here's a typical scenario just depicting what took place in the animation. We see that there is a pedestrian on the corner here. Let's progress the video. Unfortunately, he was quite aware of what was happening and could get out of the way. So this video clip is really highlighting the danger of entering an intersection at speed. And you'll see the video is self-explanatory. You'll see how much in danger these pedestrians actually were. Fortunately, a lucky escape. See, that was a narrow escape, but it could have been far worse than that. This particular clip as well, also to demonstrate what was said in the animation, that even though one might be a distance from the actual corner, one could still be in a position of danger. So that's what this clip is highlighting. So have a look at the pedestrians in this far corner. Okay, so we can see how far this vehicle actually traveled across the corner, quite a distance. And so just to repeat the point, if you're a pedestrian, be aware of what's happening, even though you are a distance from the actual corner itself. What this clip is demonstrating is that it may not be a collision or a near miss between vehicles in the intersection, but we'll see this truck carrying its load, going around the corner, is traveling too fast for the heavy load, and so it's top heavy, overbalances, and the logs actually pose a threat to these pedestrians. So a truck going around the corner and toppling over is not an uncommon occurrence. And I've got another page on the website that has a look at trucks specifically. And this particular danger of overbalancing either the truck itself or the trailer that it's pulling, and the danger that the cargo then poses as the truck or the trailer topples over. So this clip I've included because we see a mom pushing a pram here. I assume it's a mom. But as a parent, one has to be especially cautious, either with a little baby in a pram such as this, or carrying a little kiddie, or walking a toddler, and one is actually at the corner of the intersection. There we go. So we see how close that was to the pram. Fortunately, nothing happened there. This particular clip is demonstrating something quite different. See if you can notice what that is. Right, so that was unexpected. So the driver of this vehicle hadn't straightened out after coming around the corner, still had the wheels turned in, but you can imagine if you as a pedestrian, you're walking across this path over here, that's the least thing that you would expect, that the driver wouldn't straighten out after taking the corner. And so you could have been in peril, having been caught between the front of the vehicle and this post over here. So one can imagine how one could very easily have been crushed, even though the vehicle itself wasn't traveling at high speed, but could pose a tremendous danger. And so this is also something that, although is not common, this happens from time to time. I've also got a previous video that actually has a look at drivers taking a corner but failing to straighten out after the corner. So as a pedestrian, just to be aware of that. I've included this clip because aside from a vehicle going through the intersection, you'll see that this vehicle collides with one of the lampposts, knocks it over, and the post itself could also be a tremendous danger in its falling on a pedestrian. Fortunately, that wasn't the case here, but could very easily have been the case. So notice the post falling over, and if you just happen to be walking at that spot, you can imagine what likely could have happened. So this likewise is a second clip just to highlight the point of speed at an intersection. So for both the driver not wanting to enter the intersection at speed, but also for pedestrians to be aware, especially if this is a higher speed intersection, not to be standing right on the edge of the corner, because then you put yourself in tremendous risk. Fortunately, nothing happens here, but once again, a very close call, a near miss. So this is a little bit of a variation on the theme. Also a danger to a pedestrian on the corner, but not because of the vehicle itself, but we see something else that actually takes place here. So see if you can notice the danger. So I don't know if you caught that. Happened quite quickly. I'm just going to go back a section and show you what the danger is. Right, so let's just advance that frame by frame. And notice the boot is opened and you've got all these items in the boot, but one of them is flung into the direction of this pedestrian, actually catches her on the foot there. Right, so it didn't look like a heavy object and didn't look like she sustained any injury, but you can imagine if there was something else that was a lot weightier and he's flung from a vehicle after a crash or a collision at the intersection, and this debris is flung far and wide, and you just happen to be in the path of some heavy moving object. So here we see another very close call. Now this adult is doing the right thing by having the kiddie or the toddler away from the danger, away from the street, so more towards the inner section of the corner, but still really too close to the edge of the corner. So could have been more cautious and perhaps been a little bit further back. What I want to illustrate in this as well is that if you're on the other side of a post, so whether it be a traffic light such as this or a street lamp, advertising billboard, then you're at least a little bit protected should a car cross over the corner here into your path. At least that will slow down and hopefully stop such a vehicle. We see nothing happens here, but it's a very close call. Just a replay of that. Unfortunately, they came away unscathed. So this last clip I've included to show that even after the impact, a vehicle could still pose a bit of a danger. So I've got a separate section again on another website page which shows the importance after an accident of stopping the vehicle. But we've seen many of the accidents that take place that the driver is so bewildered by what's happened, forgets to actually bring the vehicle to a stop. So fortunately, here too, nothing happens, but it just shows where a very possible danger is. please like, subscribe, and get notified.